WWP Genetics, we're thrilled to have you join us for another engaging and informative video. Today we will be discussing California's cannabis tax hike, a looming crisis for the legal market. California's legal cannabis industry is standing at a crossroads as the state prepares to implement a significant tax increase that could reshape the market's future. On July 1, 2025, the state's cannabis excise tax is scheduled to jump from 15% to 19%, a 26% increase in the rate that has stirred widespread alarm among growers, retailers, and industry advocates alike. This impending change stems from Assembly Bill 195, legislation signed into law in 2022 that sought to reform cannabis taxation by eliminating the cultivation tax, a move designed to give relief to growers burdened by compounding costs. However, the bill also included a safeguard provision mandating an automatic increase in the excise tax if cannabis tax revenues failed to meet a minimum threshold. That threshold was set at $670 million per year, money that had been earmarked to fund a host of programs ranging from early childhood education to substance abuse prevention, environmental restoration, and law enforcement oversight. The state now estimates that only about $468 million in cannabis tax revenue will be available for the upcoming fiscal year, triggering the planned hike in the excise tax rate. The tax increase comes at a particularly fragile moment for California's cannabis economy. After the legalization of adult-use cannabis in 2016 via Proposition 64, there was widespread optimism about the potential for a safe, lucrative, and socially responsible cannabis market. Billions of dollars were expected to flow into state coffers, thousands of new jobs were projected to be created, and entire communities that had been disproportionately impacted by the war on drugs were promised a path to participation and prosperity in the legal industry. In the years since, however, that vision has been steadily eroded. The legal market has faced overwhelming structural challenges, a labyrinth of local restrictions that limit where cannabis can be grown and sold, an arduous and expensive licensing process, extensive compliance requirements, and layer upon layer of taxation at the state and local levels. These factors have combined to squeeze profit margins for legal operators and leave many unable to compete with a deeply entrenched illicit market that remains largely untouched by regulation. This economic stress has manifested in stark terms. Since 2021, legal cannabis sales in California have dropped significantly, while cannabis excise tax revenues have plunged by as much as 44%. Meanwhile, nearly 15% of all cannabis businesses in the state were in default on their taxes as of December 2023, collectively owing over $240 million. These figures reflect not only individual business failures, but a broader market correction that many fear will accelerate with the impending tax hike. The cultivation sector has been particularly hard hit. Many small family-run farms in regions like the Emerald Triangle have been forced to close or drastically reduce operations, unable to navigate the high cost of compliance and the ongoing collapse in wholesale prices. Retailers, too, are feeling the squeeze, with some resorting to steep discounts or operating at a loss in order to retain customers. For many, the looming tax increase represents a final straw, an added burden that may render legal operations entirely unsustainable. The illicit cannabis market, by contrast, continues to thrive. It is estimated that illegal sales account for as much as 60% of all cannabis transactions in California. Unlicensed growers and dealers are able to offer significantly lower prices because they are not subject to the regulatory and tax obligations that weigh down licensed businesses. This price differential is not merely a competitive inconvenience, it is a structural flaw that undercuts the foundational logic of legalization. Consumers faced with economic pressures of their own are increasingly turning to these unregulated sources, especially when they perceive the products to be comparable in quality but available at a lower price point. The result is a market bifurcated into legal and illegal segments, with the former shrinking under financial strain and the latter growing more emboldened. In this context, the planned increase in the excise tax has drawn sharp criticism from across the industry. Many argue that increasing taxes in a declining market defies common economic sense. Rather than boosting revenues, they warn, the hike could deepen the fiscal crisis by driving more businesses to close and more consumers into the unregulated market. Industry leaders such as Jared Kelo, president of the United Cannabis Business Association, have likened the move to economic suicide, warning that the industry is heading toward an extinction event if immediate action is not taken. The situation has become so dire that some municipalities are beginning to consider whether they should intervene directly to support local cannabis businesses or provide tax relief at the local level. But while some cities may have the flexibility to act, many others are grappling with their own budget deficits, as in the case of San Diego, which recently approved an increase in its own cannabis business tax from 8 to 10% in an effort to close a $258 million budget gap. In the face of these mounting pressures, state lawmakers are beginning to reconsider their approach. Assemblymember Matt Haney has introduced Assembly Bill 564, which would freeze the cannabis excise tax at its current rate of 15%, thereby preventing the automatic increase scheduled for July. Haney and his allies argue that keeping taxes stable is essential to protecting the fragile legal market, and that failing to do so would jeopardize both the economic viability of cannabis businesses and the state's long-term tax revenue goals. The bill has been endorsed by a range of industry groups, including the California Cannabis Industry Association and the Cannabis Distribution Association, both of which argue that the existing tax structure is unsustainable and out of step with market realities. Advocates for tax relief also point out that the promise of equity in legalization, enshrined in numerous state and local initiatives, cannot be fulfilled if minority-owned and small businesses are driven out by economic hardship. The outcome of this legislative effort remains uncertain. While there is growing recognition in Sacramento of the legal market struggles, there is also a strong fiscal incentive to preserve state revenues, especially in light of broader budget challenges. As lawmakers weigh the competing demands of economic prudence and regulatory fairness, the cannabis industry is left in limbo, anxiously awaiting a decision that will likely determine its trajectory for years to come. At stake is not only the financial health of cannabis businesses, but also the public interest in a regulated, transparent, and equitable cannabis economy. If the legal market collapses, California will lose its ability to enforce safety standards, collect taxes, and provide consumer protections. Moreover, it would send a discouraging message to other states attempting to model their own cannabis regulations on California's example. California's cannabis tax hike is more than just a policy adjustment. It is a pivotal moment in the state's ongoing experiment with cannabis legalization. How the state navigates this crisis will reverberate beyond its borders, informing national conversations about the balance between regulation, taxation, and market viability. For now, the industry waits, bracing itself for what could either be a much-needed course correction or the beginning of a terminal decline. Either way, the decisions made in the coming months will have long-lasting implications for the future of cannabis in California and the legitimacy of its regulatory framework. We hope you found today's video informative. Don't forget to subscribe, like, comment and share to stay updated on our latest content. For more exciting insights, be sure to check out our brother channel at WWP Logistics. See you in the next video.